So my name is Rachel Taplin. If we haven't met before, I'm the proud owner of Media Matchmaker and so excited to be here with you today. We launched something new with Media Matchmaker so that we can connect you to podcast hosts and get podcast interviews. Podcasts have gone through the roof. They really have, and are still growing. And we've got two amazing podcast guests who are experts in their field. And I've worked with both of them before. One is Elliot Kay and the other is Jim James. Elliot, can I just get you to give a brief introduction so people know what you do, and then we can ask you questions as we go along?
Sure. What I do when I'm not podcasting or on the podcast?
On the podcast, and a bit of what you don't when you do when you're not.
Okay, so my name's Elliot Kay and I work with business owners and entrepreneurs to help them use public speaking to be more giraffe, to stand out for the right reasons, stick their neck out, be seen, be heard as an authority, as an expert through the use of speaking, so virtual or non. That's what I do in a nutshell. It's all about being more giraffe. You'll never forget that. Outside of that, I train people to be more giraffe through their speaking, but we also have a gig sourcing company that finds speaking opportunities for speakers. We become your sales team. So we are not a bureau and agency. What we are is your sales team. We do outreach, we have the conversations, and then we find you speaking opportunities. The podcast I run is all about being an expert in speaking, how you can better your speaking, how you can further your speaking, how you can be an authority through speaking. And I'm done speaking.
I highly recommend Elliot. It's absolutely amazing. And we've had some of his great members within the Media Matchmaker group. Jim, can I get you to introduce yourself as well? That'd be wonderful.
Yes, I'm just going on. I'm busy trying to type as well. You're making us multitask this morning, Rachel. So, hi, my name's Rachel Taplin. And I'm really proud to be here. So my name's Jim James. I'm the host of the Unnoticed Entrepreneur Show. And I am going to talk with you today about content curation. And my sort of topic and takeaway is how you can make your podcast into a book. I have 30 years as an entrepreneur and running a PR agency in Asia and a few other businesses. But today we're going to talk about podcasting and about how you can make a podcast into part of your content curation strategy.
Fantastic. So let's kick off. So we've got so much that we want to cram in. So guys, as you go along, if you've just joined us, please put your welcome message, what it is you do, the topics you can talk about. And if you're a podcast host, let us know you are a podcast host. Katie will try and message as many people as we can, but it's all gone a bit crazy. So any questions that have come in so far, I've got a number of questions as well in here. Let's start with Elliot and Jim. What do you actually look for in a podcast guest? We're all here because we want publicity. We want to raise our profile and get podcast interviews. So Elliot, what do you look for in a podcast guest?
I love that question. Here's the thing. So because our podcast, the Public Speaking Expert podcast, it's very vibrant, it's very fun, it's very energetic. What we look for in a guest is someone that matches that, is willing to banter with us, but equally has deep and unique insights when it comes to speaking, when it comes to how to use speaking as an authority piece. We get asked loads, can I be on your podcast? And the key thing for me is, what is your expertise when it comes to speaking? I get you're an expert, but it's very important that we stay in line with what the theme of the podcast is. And because the ratio we have is 3-1, so 3-1 episodes we do to one interview, it's important that that guest actually adds value, because it's not an interview format podcast, and they bring a unique expertise while be energetic, fun, and have good banter. That's what we look for when it comes to a guest. Over to you, Rachel. I mean, Jim, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Well, Rachel, I think that for me, again, I echo first what Elliot says, is that the podcast, The Unnoticed Entrepreneur, has an editorial theme. So much like a magazine or a newspaper, the podcast has a theme and it has an audience. And I'm catering to entrepreneurs that want to grow their business from 6 to 7 figures by building the brand of the business. So first of all, does the guest fit into that theme? Second is, do they fill a gap that I haven't covered so far? I have 475 episodes so far, and I'm looking for people that fill different gaps, for example, in MarTech. So if you want to be a guest on the Unnoticed Entrepreneurs, what do you bring that might be new for the audience? And I think the third thing, which Elliot touched on, is about passion and the ability to get the earphones crackling, because there are so many people who can come on a show and kind of bore the audience with us. And, people forget this is entertainment, right? So we need people to come on the show and to lift the mic and make people go, wow, I love that show. So those are the three things that I'm looking for.
Fantastic. So what are the must-haves? So just before we get into in terms of if they're going to come on the show, what are the must-haves they need? Now we know certain things like the microphone. What do they need, and what level of quality of stuff do they need? Because I know when we did ours, Jim, we had to redo it, didn't we? Which was a shame, but it show business, it happens. But what do you actually ultimately need?
Yeah. Elliot, do you want to go first? Shall I go first?
No, Jim, if you can answer that, that'd be
okay.
great.
So Rachel, I think, I made us do second because I love talking to you. So actually I made up, we didn't need to do it a second time at all. I just wanted an excuse to come back to you. So first of all, obviously, is microphone. And I've just got a Q2U, which is USB and XLR and very portable and low budget. So I like that. Headphones, obviously, would be the other key thing. And then obviously we talked about quiet room, but if you use the headphones. And the other thing is lights, because if you have lights on your, and I put this here, if you have lights, then people can increasingly use the audio and the video at the same time. So I think having a couple of lights, so that's really just three things, good input, good output, and good illumination.
That's great. Anything to add to that, Elliot, from your end?
The only thing I would add is a tidy background. That's the only thing I would add to that as well, especially with these days where podcasts are streamed and video as well. Obviously, if it's audio only, it doesn't matter. You can be in pajamas and your boxers. But if you are like we do, we stream ours live on LinkedIn every Monday. It is important your background reflects. Because think about it, you're a brand, and if you've got a messy background or your underwear hanging in the background, unless that's your brand, it can actually mislead people. So, if you're in underwear space, cool, have underwear hanging up.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people now are repurposing a podcast. They're using it for video. They're using it for the audio as well. So, just because if you've done video interviews, you can then strip the audio out and then you've got a podcast show, haven't you? So it's been multimedia, kind of having that same content, but making it multimedia ready, which is what we're all about, isn't it? So, these are great things to consider. Now, if you have a question...
sorry, can I just add a couple of things? One thing also about having a mic, a camera. It's been interesting. I've had a few interviews with people who have plainly trying to do it on a phone or an old iPad or something. And I think that's increasingly important. We should just mention the visual element if we're talking about that, because people are looking down into their camera. So to make sure that you have the camera at a good eye height, have it on a tripod or lift your laptop up. That's the other part that I think it can be distracting if you don't get those elements right.
That's a good point, actually. We're all trying to look into our camera now, aren't we? And we're all
trying
to find us as well. No, that's a great. Now, guys, if you have a question, it's going to be a really short question, if you don't mind. It's not a chance to pitch yourself at this moment. So if you can just literally put your question in, just raise your hand that you can put through the emoji somewhere in here and the reactions, and then we can get you to just announce your question to these guys. What's the best way to approach you guys to be a podcast guest? How do we get hold of you? Do we send you an email? Do we obviously listen to the show? What's the best way to approach you, Elliot? Can we start with you?
Yeah, of course. There's a couple of best ways to approach. Obviously, I'd really want you to have an expertise that adds value to the theme of the podcast, right? So it's the public speaking expert podcast. So what expertise do you bring for speakers, public speakers, or expert speakers? That to me is number one. Number two, when you approach like I'm a human being, and, also bring what's in it for me. So I get that you're an expert and I get there's something that you want to bring. I know you want the exposure. That's a given. You want to get on the podcast, you want exposure. We have no problem promoting. We make you the sponsor of the podcast. You share links. That's a given for us. But what I want to understand is, what is the giraffe nose? What do you bring to the podcast that's going to put you above everyone else that's approaching us? And the way to do it, you can either do it through the Public Speaking Expert show on Instagram. You can approach me on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm very approachable. Send me a DM. But the only thing I would suggest, and I do get this a lot, and it's very off-putting, please don't come with how great you are and how privileged I should be to have you on the podcast. Come with the value you're going to bring. And I do get that, and that's an immediate no. I just immediately, you could be great, but if you're going to tell me that I'm going to be privileged to have you on my podcast, it's just off-putting. It's a bit like me going up to Rachel in a bar, go, Rachel, you'd be so lucky to date me. Let's go out. But you know what? You should be grateful for that moment. It's off-putting, right? It's the same. We're relationships, we're people. What's in it for me? What do you bring to the table that's unique? The rest is a given. We'll promote you, we'll support you, we'll shine the light on you. So just think of approaching us as a person versus a commodity. That's what I would say. And I'll give the email in a minute because we've just changed it. So I need to find it and I'll put it in the chat. If anyone wants to approach to be on it, we're always open to guests.
Yeah, that'd be great. Someone's put as well, I think, is what's the best way to find podcasts suitable for market. So what you'll be able to do very soon, at the moment, our podcast host can search for you as a guest within Media Matchmaker, which I'm going to show you in a minute how they can find you and how you can create your media profile. But what you'll also be able to do soon as well is search for appropriate podcasts, shows by their sector. So that's going to be fantastic for you. So you can go to the relevant shows, whether it's business, whether it's health, whether it's beauty. Jim, have we missed anything in how you like them to approach you? Or do you search for your guests, or do guests come to you? How does it work?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think, Elliot's covered a lot of good things. One is cash, of course. Throw cash at podcast hosts. There's no harm in that. Although not crypto. Second thing, one thing that hosts are looking for is other communities. So if you've got a community, explain how you're going to help our show get into your community, because it's all listener get listener. So that's really, really important to people. I have a website, which I'll put in the link, where I have an application form for people that are going to become a guest. And Elliot's covered all the main points, but remember that the person on this side has kind of admin to do. So if you're getting random emails saying, can I be on the show, then that's extra work. So you can make life easier for the host if you use their booking form. So I'm going to share with you on mine, I have a place where you can add your details. So think about making life as promotional for the person you're going to go on the show, and also as easy and streamlined. And Elliot's covered lots of the other stuff.
Fantastic. Jill, I'm going to come to you. Thank you for raising your hand and for being the first person. I'm going to come to you in a minute. Please raise your hand as well if you've got any questions, because this time will just run out and everyone will be going literally at 5 to 11 going, I've got a question. So ask them now. I just want to ask on that. I know you were joking about throw cash at us to approach us, but this actually is a really serious, it's got to be a win-win for both of you. But all of our podcasts that we promote do not take payment. Media and publicity should be free, but it is about helping each other. You give great content. They are happy to have you. You match their expertise, you match their audience, you give them that giraffe, that wow factor. Okay. So that's the win-win scenario. And also, yes, it is normal that you can actually promote. They will ask you to, and why would you not want to then leverage your podcast interview and promote it? So that is pretty much a given, but you shouldn't be asked for money or sponsorship in any way. We have had one person that did join this and was asking. So please, that's not what Media Matchmaker community is about. It's about an opportunity that's a win-win, that's reciprocal for both parties. Do ask you questions if you've got them. Raise your hand up or put them in the chat. Katie will count for them. Jill, can I get you to unmute yourself and ask your quick question?
Yeah, just very, very quickly. Will we get a copy of the chat, please, Rachel? Because I want to listen and not be focusing on reading the chat too much.
Yeah, I don't see why not. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, what I can do is there's going to be a way that you can access everything. So I'll be able to put it into the Media Matchmaker. So yeah, I can send that out for you, no problem at all. So that you can all work with each other. Yeah, good question. Any questions relating to our podcast hosts? Or if you are a host, actually raise your hand if you've got any points that you want to make out as well. What mistakes have people made as a podcast guest? What's the kind of the no-no thing? I mean, is there anything they've done that you thought, oh my goodness me? I know I made a mistake once, and this is something I do want to share. I was asked to go on a podcast, a show, and I made the critical mistake of not listening to the podcast first. And oh my goodness me, did I make a big mistake, because it was very controversial. It was all about how to hoodwink journalists, and it was everything I didn't stand for. And in the end, I ended up shouting to him. I don't know how I kept my cool. The interview's out there, you can hear it, and everyone was like, I shared it, I felt sick. So do your research, listen to the podcast, find out what the podcast is about, see what his values are. Anything, Jim, that you can say that people have made mistakes with you?
Yeah, we've covered off a lot on the technical side. I think a principal mistake is that people forget that this is a show. and they come on talking like to me, and they forget that there's an audience. And so I think having in mind what people want to actually talk about, but bearing in mind that it's not just for me, that I'm a conduit for a broader audience. So I think that would be, we've talked about technical mistakes and so on, but forgetting that this is a performance, I think would be the main problem. And that translates into people mumbling, into having long, repetitive conversational sentences and so on. Someone's going to have to edit this. So people could make it into 1 minute only answers, for example. So remember, it's a performance, I think would be my one takeaway.
Fantastic. Elliot, you put your hand up. Were you going to say something? And I'm going to come to, I think, Lucy that's asked a question next.
I just wanted to add another mistake I've seen a few times. A lot. I see this a lot with American guests, not so much with British, but they don't veer outside their rehearsed answer, because I like to dig deep. I like to, sometimes play devil's advocate. I'm like, because obviously we get a lot of guests going, well, you just need to get on with it. You need to get over it. You just need to have more confidence. You just need to. I'm like, yes, but for someone who's got issues with confidence, how do they actually do that? And they go, well, you just need to get on with it. You just need more confidence. And so for me, that's a big mistake, that you stay in your box and you're not willing to expand on the answer or be called out on things in a nice way. We're a very friendly podcast, nothing like Rachel described, but we do like to deep dive, and we do like to pull bits apart so we can add massive value to our listener. So for me, that's a really big mistake, is when you kind of know what you're going to say and you stick to what you're going to say, and there's no flexibility with what you're going to say, then you become a very dry and you just become a very dry guest. And for us, it's not fun to interview you. And like Jim said, it's we're entertainers, we're broadcasters, it's a show. So if you're coming across rigid and wooden, the audience are going to perceive you that way. So that's my number one guest. And I'm speaking.
And I agree with that. And it's almost, you want to give different content that you've never shared before, and be vulnerable, don't you? Because we're all in business. It's hard. Sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's amazing, and that's the roller coaster that we go through. And if we can share, the highs and lows and the honesty, I think that's what comes out in podcasts, because you can be so much more open, can't you? And, and it's nice when you connect to people as well. And it's nice when you put a bit of fun in it and you dive deeper, because sometimes when you're speaking on stage, or you're doing a presentation, you only put against the value that they want rather than, underneath. So that's great. Lucy, I'm going to come to you next. If you've got any questions, please do raise your hand so I can come to you. Lucy, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
It wasn't a question, actually. It was just a bit of an observation. I was just going to add something else on the as a host, something on the basics of the kit. I was just going to say a really good Wi-Fi connection. And I know that should be an absolute given these days. But if you know that you've got a slightly dodgy Wi-Fi connection, or that it's a bit temperamental, go and find yourself somewhere that is going to be pretty solid, because that can you can be really well prepared with everything else, but if that's going to let you down, that can be a real headache. The other thing I was going to say from a pitching point of view is, and it picks up on your point about exclusive content. I work in my podcast is really niche. It's for a really, really niche market, but it does mean that my guests often get book deals. On the back of it, they win work on the back of coming on the podcast. But it'd be quite disappointing for me, because there are now more podcasts in the same sphere, in the same niche, that if I interview somebody and then before that goes live, I notice that they've been on the other two as well. So I think some real transparency about that. And because if, again, as you said, if you're going to repeat the same thing, that's going to be really hard and disappointing as a host. So, and again, with your pitch, make sure that you've listened to the podcast and that you can talk about your value in relation to that audience. And if you can reference another conversation and build on that point, that will be brilliant, and to explain why your point of view is relevant. So yeah, that was just my point.
No, those are excellent points, and it's really important that, it's like any media, it's like with the media, with the press, they want an exclusive story, they want a new story, which is exactly what you guys as podcast hosts, and obviously if there's anyone else, podcast hosts, that have got any tips that they want to share, please let us know, because they do want exclusive content. They're trying to, entertain their audience, like you say, it's a show. So yeah, that's a great one about internet as well, absolutely. They're not hotspotting against somewhere in a cafe shop or something like that, which I've had before, with people, not that I've done that, but okay, so here's a question for you, Jim. You've had so many shows, it's done extremely well with the B2B market. How far in advance do you pre-record your shows, and then how far in advance have you got your guests? So do you forward plan your topics, and how does that work?
Yeah, and I wish I could give you the answer that it's all batch processing months in advance, but actually I tend to take the more Bloomberg approach, in that I try and turn things around within 48 hours. So I like it to be quite topical and quite new. So I tend to take people a couple in a week, and then they'll come out the following week. And I have a VA team in the Philippines, so I can record one day, and then overnight the people in the Philippines use a platform called Descript. And so then by the following Monday, we'll have the trailer, and the Tuesday the full show, Wednesday the trailer, and Thursday the next show. So it tends to be I record the week before, so that it's still topical and live.
Fantastic. That's great. And that's like most media, they want to be on trend, don't they? Want it to be topical, because topics do change. What about you, Elliot? So
we do batch record. So every Monday, except for the next 2 Mondays, because Jose's away, we between 3 and 5 we record, and if there's an interview, we do 3. So we'll do the interview plus 2. If it's just us, we'll do 4. Again, depends how deep we go. And the reason for that is to give us the flexibility if we need to move something up and we need to shift something, we've always got backup. So we do have guests, for example, they're launching books and they have a date, or they're launching something. So we'll shift, we'll move them up in the queue. So it's in alignment, because ours comes out every Saturday and then is recycled on a Wednesday a month later. So we do batch record. So we're up to 100 right now in recordings, but I think we're on to 60 in terms of release. So we got plenty in reserve. Should, I don't know, Jose and I have a divorce and stop speaking for a while, then we've got plenty to go on. But yeah, we always back, because of my experience with having run another podcast called Voice for Good, and having to turn it around quickly and all that, I just didn't enjoy that experience. I was like, do you know what? I'm going to pump out loads of content, and then we have a bank as well. Fantastic. So that's how we do things.
Fantastic. Guys, what I want to do is just share with you very briefly, we've developed Media Matchmaker so that you can put your profiles up so they're multimedia ready. So pretty similar to what Jim was saying earlier, is if you're taking an audio and you're doing a podcast interview, you might as well video it as well, so you can use it as video for YouTube. The media want multimedia ready kind of stories. So whether it's a soundbite, whether it's video content, whether it's obviously written word. And what we're doing with Media Matchmaker now is you will soon be able to search, as I said, for the podcast hosts. I'm just going to screen share with you very quickly. You'll be able to screen share with the podcast hosts, and then they'll be able to search and find your profile by keyword. So let me just, can you all see my screen? Elliot, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so what I'm just going to do is just play this to you. It's literally only 3 minutes long, but this is how you can showcase your profile. So just have a watch of this. So we'd love you to make the most out of your profile so that you're multimedia ready and you've got everything set so journalists can find you. When you log into Media Matchmaker, everything happens via your dashboard. So to manage your account, the most important thing to do is you can add all your details in here. So, and your location. So if you're looking for regional press, the journalists can find you. You can upload your photos in here and cover photos. It's also, the platform is multimedia ready, so that if you want to get onto radio or on TV, you can upload your audio files. If you are looking, as I say, to be on TV, it's great if they can see you, so you can put all your videos. And then obviously you can create photo albums as well. So the next thing to do is, in your additional details, is to decide what type of media requests and podcast interviews you are interested in, and simply just tick the categories that are of interest to you. Coming soon, we're also going to be adding it so if you're a speaker, you can get speaker opportunities, or as an author, you can have further invites from people that are looking to speak to authors. Your about information, you just simply can copy and paste what you've got from LinkedIn to get started, and everything is searchable by keywords. So whatever keywords you put in here, the journalist will be able to find you. Now, looking at it the other way, this is Kevin, who works for the BBC. What the journalist can then do is they can actually search for experts by any keyword, by any category, or by any region. So if we're going to put in health, for example, the journalist can see then who comes up in the profiles, get in touch with them, look at any photos they might have, look at their videos. They can either contact them directly or give them a call. Now, the journalist can also go in and submit media requests, and as a podcast host you will have access to these also, and you just type in what type of media request you're looking for help with, whether it's an expert profile, whether it's a podcast guest interview, the categories of interest, so that then these categories will match the categories to you. They'll tell you the media type and if it's local or regional. It's really important that you update your preferences so that you can receive then the relevant media requests. These will come into your inbox as well as coming into your dashboard. So we have all sorts, depending on the categories you've chosen, of media requests coming in, looking for professional tips from a psychologist, accounts how to combat driving anxiety, finance experts, speak to people who started a business in lockdown, outstanding women coaches for our NFT showcase. So there's absolutely everything in here. You cannot predict what the journalists are going to be looking for. We've got journalists joining every single day and posting media requests, so it's really important you make your profile stand out. So guys, what I want to do as well is share with you, as before we end, how we can feature you and connect you to journalists, which is really important. We're getting so many success stories. And as I say, this month it's all been about podcasts. So we're going to carry on with our podcast guests. Also, if you are a podcast host, perhaps you can, what reactions do we have? Can you just put a thumbs up in the reactions if you are a podcast host, so that our guests can actually find you and then connect with you if they want to. And now is the time, the second half, what we're going to do is kind of do more questions if you've got any questions, but also we're going to pitch some kind of stories and some ideas. So I asked all of you, Katie, can you just put in and copy and paste in my name is, the topics and the example, so everyone's got it. So if you just want to give yourself a pitch to some of our podcast hosts, then they can listen to you. Now, this is just going to be 30 seconds long. We're going to try a few of these, but what we're going to do then is get Elliot and Jim to give some feedback on whether they feel A, it could be appropriate for their show, or B, how you would approach somebody and what they want to look out for. Media Matchmaker is all about learning so you can be the best at your own publicity, so you can take your PR in-house. So don't worry if you get it wrong. We're here to help you. We're here to guide you. You know, there's no wrong or right way. But what we want to try and do is make you be the best version of yourself when you're approaching podcast hosts. So is there anybody that would like to, if you raise your hand, if you put your thumbs up if you're a podcast host, and raise your hand if you would like to do a quick pitch. Now, this is where what normally happens, it goes quiet here and nobody wants to pitch first. Jill, you're going to, oh, well done for raising your hand. You get the gold star for being first on 2 occasions. Jill, do you want to pitch what it is you do and then and let us know?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Jill Poet. I'm the CEO of the Organisation for Responsible Businesses, and it's about driving a better way of doing business for micro and small businesses. So it's showing how they can look after their people. If they've got staff, they don't have to. They could just be a sole proprietor to help support the community. And of course, sustainability, but a holistic approach to sustainability for small businesses.
Fantastic. You'd literally just done that, because I've got the timer going here. So I was waiting for that to go off. So well done. What do you think about that, Jim and Elliot? Is there anything you think would be relevant? Obviously for you, Elliot, as if she was a speaker perhaps, but Jim, is there anything that you would find of interest in that? And how did you find that approach?
Yeah, I think one area that's of interest to entrepreneurs now is about, and companies, about ESG and about how sustainability and if you like, the whole ESG approach not only is taken in the boardroom but is also communicated into the marketplace, so that it doesn't look like, for example, like greenwashing. So for me, with the Unnoticed Entrepreneur, I'm always really working to help entrepreneurs learn how to get noticed, so how to position themselves, how to do story, how to use technology, So this idea of how a company can adopt an ESG strategy and then communicate that would be of interest. In fact, I'm talking with an ESG consultant on how companies can communicate what they do and see it as part of their business strategy rather than as a PR piece. So, Jill, yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Fantastic. Elliot, any feedback? And I'm perhaps then I'll go to one to the other in between. Elliot?
No, I mean, in terms of it with my podcast ears, I thought that was really effective because you're very clear on who that would attract. For me, I'm always listening, just me personally, I always listen for the problem you're solving in greater depth, but that's a preference. That doesn't mean you did anything wrong. So if you could just add just a bit more for me to catch my, like, what's the big problem you're solving, that would help me go, just a little bit more. That's it.
That's a great tip. Thank you. And we often forget to do that, don't we, really? Because we're so passionate about getting it right, we forget what the problem is. Okay, wonderful. So if you've got any questions as well, and you want or you want to pitch, we're going to do some pitches and we're going to come to questions. So Isabel, we're going to come to you next, and we're going to go to Bhavin, and then obviously please do raise your hand because we will run out of time. So Isabel, can I come to you? Isabella, you to next.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, hi there. So I am Isabella Natrins. I'm the CEO of the UK Health Coaches Association. Health coaching is a relatively new modality which helps people change behaviour and lifestyle to combat chronic disease. It's changing the landscape for healthcare delivery, for patients' and clients' health outcomes, and transforming health professionals' practice. And our mission is to get out there and tell everybody how powerful it is.
Oh, look at that. Fantastic. Well done. That delivery was really good. Jim, how did that come across? Might not be specifically for your listeners, potentially, but if there's any also, guys, if you're a podcast host, please do message the guests so that you can obviously connect to them. I will be giving you the chat, so don't worry. Thank you for coming on. We'll be able to see who's come on, so you'll be able to get the chat afterwards so you can relax and just enjoy this session. How was that delivery, Jim?
Yeah, I realise it's a bit like Shark Tank, isn't it? Sort of Shark Tank for podcast. I think, first of all, it sounds like a really fantastic mission. It wouldn't be for my entrepreneur community, but it sounds like a great mission. And I think something Elliot said earlier on, which is great, was about what would be the talking points that Isabella could bring to the podcast. Ideally, 1 or 2 or 3 key talking points. Then would have closed. It wouldn't be quite right for my podcast, but you mentioned what you do and the so what, and these are the 1 or 2, 3 things that I could tell your audience that they won't know yet about this industry and this problem we're solving would have been useful.
And that's a really good tip. And that's something we always do when we send out intro emails to our journalists. But this is also something you can do in your profile in Media Matchmaker. You can put some audio in there so they can hear you, or a video so they can see you, and actually almost pitch and say, this is my podcast, topics I can talk about. Yep. And like you say, what problems are you solving? What could be different about the show that you could bring to them? So yeah, thank you. So Bhavindra, I'm going to come to you, and then I'll get Elliot to give feedback on this one. Any questions, please do put them in the chat. Bhavin, can I come to you next?
Sure. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So yeah, I'm just going to discuss a bit about what I do and how it would be helpful as
30 seconds.
Yeah. Now it's more niche. It's more aimed at parents who have children who wear glasses. During the pandemic, particularly, there was a massive shift. A lot of kids who were stuck in front of a screen. They weren't being able to go to school. A lot of them became more short-sighted during this time. Now, what I specialize in actually is how to slow down the rate of change. So we've had children where their eyes haven't changed as fast as others because we've been able to help them. And I think really actually the word needs to be out there because so many could be helped by it.
That's really interesting. See, I'm interested to find out more from that.
Yeah.
So what's your feedback on that, Elliot, and in terms of the shows that he could approach? Because I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? Well, very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's very unique in itself. And I think, again, if you led with the problem, because I think most people can relate to that. So it's like, we know since the pandemic that challenges or issues with eyes have been accelerated. The problem is, how do you slow that down? How do you even prevent the what's the I can't think the
deterioration?
The eyes getting worse. That's where I come in. We have a unique methodology that allows us to intervene, slow it down, and potentially eliminate that. If you'd like me to discuss that, get in touch, right? So
Yeah.
because you're so problem focused and solution focused, lead with that. With all the love in the world, you're almost irrelevant, but you aren't, if that makes sense, because it's not about you, it's about your solution and the problem.
Right.
So that's why I would lead with, oh, by the way, I'm Bhavin and I deliver this. Right. That's what I mean. Do you see what I mean? Really good problem, solution, keep talking points as Jim. Let's talk more, because already I'm sure there's loads of people here fascinated by what we do, including myself.
Yeah,
as someone who got glasses after the pandemic, but I've got astigmatism.
Even adults, everybody's eyes are different to how they were before.
Yeah, exactly.
Jim, are you going to say something?
Well, yeah, I think also what you've got is such a wonderfully broad topic, Bhavin. The key really is and Rachel will tell you this about the need to then know show you're pitching to, because what you're talking about, you've got optometrists that will be interested, you've got parents that will be interested, you've got healthcare professionals that will be interested, and you've got some children. My sister produced some videos about the impact of light on children. We produced them using a platform called Lumen 5. And we got over 1 million views on 30-second, 60-second explainer videos that we made for teenagers. So I could see lots of different types of positioning for the same story, but really dependent on which podcast you're going
to. Audience.
So, so Rachel, I'm sure, will tell you that in those pitches, not one pitch for all outlets, because they've all got a different audience. They're all telling a different story.
And I think that's a really key point with this. And, you know, whatever podcast you're reaching, you've got to have the story match the audience, whether it's health, whether it's parenting, you know, even business. You could talk about, we've all sat at our screens a lot more, you know, not probably had our big monitors. That story could probably be adapted in lots of different ways to different audiences, you know, and a podcast is about reaching a community that's already established and making sure that you're matching the message to the audience. I want to just cover off as well, if there's anybody here, I mean, we've got a lot of podcast hosts here, which is fantastic. We've got our 2 experts as well, and thank you guys for anybody that offered to step in as well to help me for today's event as a podcast expert, because there was a moment Elliot may not have been able to because his son was poorly, but covered it off. So how, as a podcast host, how has it benefited you? Because there might be some podcast guests here, or us as members are thinking, should I turn my content into a podcast? You know, what would you say now, looking back now that you're doing it? Because it's a bit, for me, my worry is it's a big commitment. You've got to keep consistent with it, you know, and it's hard when you run a business. Elliot, what would you say?
So for me, it's a door opener, right? And the other thing, of course, we all have to be content machines, and that's just the reality of the world we live in right now. And so it's twofold. Number one, it gives you access where otherwise you might not have it, to interview people, to talk to people. The other side of podcasting is it gives you access to discuss partnerships. So if you leave enough time at the end, or you're strategic about who you approach, then at the end, you're like, hey, I really love what you do. Can we talk partnership? You can have that conversation. And it's a calling card, right? I mean, we've entered several awards, and we're just right now not in the place to kind of dominate any category, but it just allows you different access points to different people in a way you never had. It's a bit like a book, right? It's a big calling card. It's a big business card. And, you know, recently we got called the Ant and Dec of the podcasting world, which is great because people see in a very different light. So that's the other thing, because people might see on social media in one, like the post, like there was a time people like, he's so serious, he's so this. And then when they see the podcast, like, oh, he can be fun. So again, it gives you access to a different part of your personality, which won't come across necessarily in some of your posts or social media. The other thing I'm going to say very, very quickly is a little hack. What I've started doing is I've got this little stand, and it sits by me as I record any podcast or anything on video. I've got this little mic that I click, and now it's allowed me to multiply the content creation because I'm recording myself being recorded and I'm pumping out content as well. So that's the other thing you can utilize all this for as well. I'm done speaking.
Wow, well, great tip. What about you, Jim? And also, what if you just want a week off, you know? Do you have to be consistent every week? How does it work, Jim?
Well, I think Elliot's covered off, I think, all the main ones. Obviously, for me, it's the head end of a commercial chain of events as well. And I think that for many of us that are going from consultancy into trying to have, if you like, evergreen products, that podcasting for me gives me the opportunity to call people that otherwise wouldn't have 20-minute conversation with me, a guy in England, you know, and I'm talking to people in India, America, Australia. So it gives people of a different level of authority, a purpose, and a reason to talk to me which a one-on-one isn't much value for them, but being part of a podcast and all the content, it gets me access that it wouldn't get otherwise.
Yeah.
And then I have now the book, and then I have merchandise, and then getting courses, and I have a PR firm as well. And I'm finding clients saying, we've listened to the podcast. Do you want to do this? So I think obviously it has many, many benefits. I do think your question about consistency is key. I think there are three things. There's content, there's channels, and there's consistency. I call it the active communications index, right? And I think that you need to create content that's new and innovative, and you need to send it across selected channels, but you do need to be consistent, because it's the reliability that people come to trust. And if the frequency is once a month, that's fine. Great music, great movies don't come out every week, but every time there's a franchise, people go to watch that movie. So I think deciding, I do a Tuesday, Thursday, Elliot's got his rhythm, you've got your rhythm, whatever that is, that the audience gets to rely on you for, that I think is really key.
Fantastic.
And it's been proven that those shows that are consistent over time move up the rankings better. You know, my show's now, and sure, Elliot, mine's now in the top 3 in the UK and top 5% worldwide for podcasts, which is amazing. But it's just dogged persistence and putting something out, you know, for the last year and a half every Tuesday, Thursday, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. What we're going to do now is just go through any final questions that you might have. And then what we can do is I can answer them. I will be staying over as well if you've got anything you want to ask me and go through maybe how we could work, how we can help you. Now, Elliot, is there anything we've missed? Because this is what's going to happen now. So many people will probably ask their questions last minute and we'll be like, oh my gosh, we asked you to put them in at the beginning. Is there anything we've kind of missed off that you can give us? Any tips as either a podcast guest or a podcast host?
I think the last tip I could give is to really appreciate the podcast isn't an overnight. It's a bit of a marathon. You know, you've got to enter podcasting because you're in it for the long haul. Like, some of you might explode, and I really hope you all do. But just be aware it's about consistency. Jim said it. It's about being consistent. And it's through time you will see your podcast ranking and going up. I think we all dream on the kind of the big podcast and millions of people, but it takes time to get there. And I mean, you might not, by the way, and that's okay too, by the way. You might just want tiny audience. But that's, to me, the most important thing is about being in for the long haul. And that's the key thing with podcasts.
That's a really good, it's my last question actually that I've got on here. And I know there's going to be more. Does size matter when it comes to podcasts? I said when it comes to podcasts, because this is really important about PR right across the board. We're so like, we want to be in the nationals. We want to be, you know, on the Radio 4 or Radio 2, but actually it can be just as cost effective and just a great way to grow your audience in a really kind of quality way with smaller media outcomes, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a newsletter or a trade magazine. So does size matter when it comes to your podcast show?
For me, the only time podcast matters, the only time size matters if you're a porn star, right? That's the only time it really matters. For me, it's about sustainability, it's about growth, and it's about longevity. And then, you know, sometimes you can explode and that can destroy your business because you weren't ready for it. It's the wrong people. So for me, it's about growth, sustainability, and the long haul. So to me, no. But you can have that ambition to have a real big, loyal following. But again, you know, there's some very niche people here that, you know, they can go very deep with it and have an incredible podcast following, you know, and have a great success. So that's my answer to that.
Brilliant.
Jim?
Manta, I'm going to come to you probably, and William as well. And Kadeep, you've said you've got podcasts. I'm just going to ask you a question. Jim, any kind of things we've missed off, and what do you feel about, you know, and do you go on other podcasts as well? This is interesting. Do you try and go on other podcast shows yourself, Jim?
So you got a couple of questions in there, really, Rachel. One is, does size matter? Maybe answer that. I think that it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And so the podcast isn't an end in itself. It serves another need. And so big or small, it's a bit like, do you need lots of friends or not lots of friends? Some people prefer a bigger community for one thing, but you have a smaller gathering. So I think really it's about what purpose you're trying to fulfill. I think the other thing just about podcasting is that it's really a great leveler. So for any entrepreneurs in here and any businesses, many multinationals are failing entirely to see podcasts for the opportunity that it is. And so for anybody that is pro podcast and is willing to take, people like Jimmy Cannon, for example, does a great voice coaching course. So in other words, to get yourself prepared for podcasting, it's kind of an open space right now because big companies are just waking up to it, whereas getting into the media mainstream is really hard. Lots of PR firms are driving that. So I just see podcasting both as a host but also as a guest, an amazing opportunity. Something like only 4 million podcasts, but there are something like 400 million blogs or something ridiculous. So podcasting, we're in pretty much at the beginning. It's almost like the internet back in 95, 96, when I was suggesting to clients they might have a website, and it feels like the same. And so you could be an early mover right now, either as a guest or as a host. Both are perfectly valid, and really enjoy it.
And I think that's it. It's a really enjoyable way, but it's also a great way to practice your key messages. We teach you, we're here to make you reach as many people as you can and to get new business and more clients and to raise your profile. So it's a great way to test and obviously be honest, be vulnerable, give exclusives if you can, or exclusive content, should I say. Lucy Mann's put, and Lucy, perhaps you can share with us, you put 75% of your consultancy work comes from your 5 years of podcast awareness. So is that, which is fantastic, by the way. So in terms of, do you output your podcast once a week, once a month? How does that work for you? And what kind of clients? Forgive me, you did mention at the beginning. And also, anyone that has had success and got business from being a podcast guest, perhaps you could put your hand up and share that with us before we part. So Lucy, can I just ask you if you're still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Brilliant.
So I'm in the slow and steady camp, but absolutely echo what both the guys said about consistency. So it's I started mine in January 17, and it's once a month. But it's been every single month for 5.5 years. And I don't go, and I work for myself, I'm a consultant, and I don't go out and prospect at all. All of my work is incoming. I've got a very good network in the industry. I'm a accredited expert with a trade association, but still, even my existing network reference my podcast. So people that come to me and say, can you help? It gives me an opportunity to be in the room with them before I'm in the room. So they get a real feel for who I am, my character, my approach, if they can work with me. And as I said before, my guests are consistently winning work as well. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Fantastic. One of the things I forgot to mention as well, if you are a podcast host, but you are also looking to be guests, you can also get featured with Media Matchmaker, and we can set you up with the same offer so that you can still search. Obviously, we verify all our podcasts. So all of our media journalists that come on board, we verify them so that you can still send your press releases, still search them, but also access the daily PR leads and search to be a guest yourself. Any parting comments? I think any final question? Anyone want to raise a hand before the final question? We've got 2 or 3 minutes before we go. This is where everyone's going to go quiet. I found it really useful. I hope that you guys have as well. Elliot, thank you so much, and Jim, for sharing your expertise with this. It's simple, yet it's still quite overwhelming, and it's nice that we've had just the simple steps that we need to take. So thank you. It's been really valuable, and we'll obviously be able to access the replay if anyone wants to watch this. Neil, you've got a question you were just going to ask, getting right at the end, which is fantastic. What would you like to share?
Good morning. Firstly, I should apologise for the audio quality. I'm using a borrowed laptop and I'm not in my own flat, which sounds immediately dodgy. I've written 10 short stories for stressed grown-ups. And the podcast is pretty much those stories, and they're designed to help people relax and sleep. They started out during the long winter pandemic when my friend would contact me saying they couldn't sleep. I wrote one story that became 10 stories, and those stories are now used by NHS Wales and Exeter University as part of their wellbeing resources. For me, it's about trying to understand how then I expand that to be a more commercial enterprise, because at the moment everything's available free.
As a podcast host,
I'm a host, but only I'm the person who reads the stories, if you like.
Okay, so I'm going to mute you. Sorry, Neil. Sorry to have done that because the feedback is really bad. So, Elliot, is there any feedback on that you could get that we could give to you? And obviously, Neil, I'm happy to stay on and have a chat to you about that because I'm aware that I guess have to go on time. Elliot, any quick feedback on that last 1 minute?
Yeah, it's just very hard to hear you, obviously. I think what you're getting, a bit like Bhavin, you've got such a wide range of markets you can penetrate as a podcast guest. I've sent you a message. I'd love to host you on ours because I think there's value in what you do for stressed speakers and generally. So send me a message. But yes, really think. Also, what you need to think about, Neil, is who you want to be interviewed by, and that goes for everybody. Who do you want to be seen with? And you have a great opportunity because it's so wide that you can actually go, no, I'd rather be on these podcasts. That's my feedback. I need to jump out, take over my kids now because my wife and I are doing swapsies, going high five, and you take
11
over.
o'clock.
So good luck, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. If you
Rachel,
want
I'll
to
be in
say,
touch.
thank you, guys, and thank you to our experts. Thank you to all of you. As I say, I'm really proud of what we've achieved with Media Matchmaker. I'd love to work with you if you're interested. This you will not find on our website. The Backstage Media Pass is £600. Then the club is separate and all the private time. So it is an amazing deal. And we don't do payment plans on the website. So this offer is something for you to take up. If you want to stay behind, I can ask any questions. Or if you want to leave now, please do leave. Jim, thank you so much, my darling. I know you've got to go.
Thank you so much. It's a fabulous service you've put together. I run an agency and I think what you've put together is brilliant. And I think I'm going to close my agency now. Because
no, we work with PRs, they do a great job.
Luckily, it's in Singapore, not here. So you're not competing with me.
We're not
in my other
but actually, on that caveat, thank you, Jim, and I'll see you next time. On that caveat,
thank you for the invitation. Thank you to everyone as guests for listening to us. Thank you so much for the invitation.
No, thank you, guys. So on that note, actually, we work with PRs. PRs do a great agency. So if you're a marketing agency or PR agency, you can also register with us and have sub accounts under there as well. But any questions for me with reference to how we could help you and work together coming out of the podcast show, I'm happy to help them. You need to just unmute yourself or just raise your hand, and you can mute yourself now because I'm happy to answer your questions.